Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Alexia, and I am the program manager of the Microsoft Reactor Toronto. I will share sessions with resources with you in the chat. But before we begin, I'd like to quickly review two items, our code of conduct and event guidelines. First, please take a moment to review our code of conduct. Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. And secondly, our event guidelines. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand through the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours. I will share the link in the chat for our channel. And secondly, if you've not been on a live stream through YouTube before, please note that you must create an account on YouTube in order to access and interact in the chat. You can set that up now, and if you're unable to use the chat but have questions, feel free to reach out to us through social media. Which brings us to today's session, another session of the .NET MAUI Summer Coding Adventures. I'm going to bring in our speakers here for today. We have Bruno, we have Luis, and we have Umberto, our special guest for today. Thank you all both for all of you for being here today. And yeah, take it away.
Yes, hey, this is amazing. Hello, everyone. Hey, Luis. Hey, Humberto. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Bruno.
Hello, Bruno. Hi, Humberto. Hi, everyone.
Yes, session number 4. This is amazing. I love it.
Yes, this has been quite the journey. So I hope that you have learned a lot during these 4 sessions. So yeah, today we have also an interesting topic with our guest speaker, because, well, usually we want to store data information in our, let's say, device. So it is, let's say, good to learn what are the available options, especially when we are talking about mobile devices. But before we, let's say, go into that, can you introduce yourself, Humberto, to the audience?
Sure. I am Microsoft MVP in Developer Technologies and Microsoft Azure. I started my career with Xamarin around 10 years ago, a lot of times making mobile applications. So I have a few experience with these topics.
Yes. And even before that, you work with Windows Phone and other .NET technologies, right?
Yes. When I was a student, I made several Windows Phone applications.
Awesome, awesome. So there is a lot of, let's say, knowledge that you will be sharing with us. So we appreciate that. Okay, so, well, thank you everyone who is joining from different parts of the world. So Bruno, any comments, or we can start?
Oh, let's start. I was writing a couple of comments. David asking if the sessions were recorded. Yes, I'm going to share the link in the comments on YouTube there. But yes, everything was recorded in the past. No, remember, I am the new guy here. I don't know anything, so I am learning. I rely on you guys to make me smarter. So let's start.
Almost like me, Bruno.
you know your stuff. I know you know this. So who desktop go first? Which is the desktop? Humberto?
Or Humberto?
Yes, mine.
Yes. Okay.
There it is. Awesome. All yours.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation, Bruno, Luis, Microsoft Reactor. Thank you everyone for attending this session. Today we are talking about local data persistence made in NET MAUI. So during this session, we will explore various local storage solutions and their use cases for one of these topics. In NET MAUI, we have 4 main local storage options: SQLite, preferences, files, file handling, and a special one, secure storage for sensitive data. So we are talking a little more about SQLite, preferences, and file, but it's good to know about secure storage because some applications, like financial application, need to store some data that is important, it's sensitive, and you don't want to share it in plain text. So we are starting with SQLite. It's a lightweight, easy to use relational database for storing structured data and performing complex queries. So it's not like SQL Server, but you have some concepts that you can apply in this technology. It's common in mobile applications, not only in NET MAUI. You can use SQLite in desktop applications, native Android applications, iOS applications with Swift, or the native languages like Objective-C. So maybe it's a good option for cross-platform applications. And not only talking about cross-platform application with NET MAUI, because you can export the database and use it in other languages and other technologies. Second, we are talking about the Preferences API. It's a key value store for storing small amounts of data, such as user settings, app configurations. And normally you are using, if you are using primitive values like Boolean, integer, strings, this is a good option. It's simpler than SQLite, so you can use it in several scenarios where you don't want all the stuff that you can have if you use SQLite. Then we are going to talk about file handling. This is more like the old style in desktop application with .NET using System.io APIs. So for people who are working with .NET framework, there is not a lot of new stuff for this topic, but it's good to know for people who are starting their careers in .NET. So every time that I talk about this is really good for me to share some tips about how to implement this in mobile application. So file handling is a flexible way to work with files and contents on the device, such as images, documents, and custom file formats. And the last but not the least important, a secure encrypted key value store like preferences for sensitive data like user credentials and authentication tokens. It's not a good practice to save user credentials, but sometimes it happens. So secure storage will be the best place to store information like this. So take it in account. Let's start with SQLite. Indeed, we are talking about a summary about these technologies, but now I am going to share some information, some details about every of those topics. What is the best use case for SQLite? Store structured information and perform queries. Sometimes we need relations, so SQLite supports it. It's not like a relational database like SQL Server database because we don't have all the infrastructure to get the relations, to manage a lot of data, indexes, and other important technologies or APIs to manage data, but it's good for mobile applications. Some common use cases include stored user data, activity logs, offline content. Offline synchronization is a really good topic that you can cover with SQLite, with an API in Azure or other hosts, but you can only use SQLite for offline data. If you don't need to synchronize, it doesn't matter. You can store structured data in SQLite, and it's really easy to implement. We have two common implementation options. First is the NuGet package SQLite PCL, and the second is Entity Framework Core. During this session, we will cover the first one, SQLite PCL. There are a lot of documentation about this NuGet package since the times of Xamarin development. So I think it's good to know this approach. And Entity Framework Core is more like the ASP.NET way. And so it's really, really easy to implement using another technology tutorial, ASP.NET or desktop application, .NET Core with Entity Framework. But both technologies, the NuGet package, SQLite PCL, and Entity Framework Core, relies on other packages to manage data with SQLite. So at the end, we will have the same kind of file with the database. First, we need to install the NuGet package, SQLite PCL, in our MAUI project, the NET MAUI project. This package provides us with the necessary tools to work with SQLite in our applications. For Android, we need a little workaround, and it is necessary to install the second package that is shown in this application. This package is only necessary for Android, but we don't care about install in the NET MAUI project. The infrastructure of the package is take care for Android and don't affect iOS applications. So you can install both packages and then start to work with your database and your data that you want to store in the local storage. Then once we have installed the packages, we can set up and connect our SQLite database in .NET MAUI. To do this, we need this namespace, SQLite. Then we need to create an instance of SQLite async connections. And for the SQLite async connection, we need a DB path. The DB path is a local path in our file system. I recommend you to use this file system app data directory because iOS has some restrictions about its local storage. And with this path, you can get the correct path for all the platforms, for Android, for iOS, and of course for desktop applications with Mac or Windows. So this is the recommended DB path. And the name you can use every name you want. It doesn't matter. It's like the file name at the end, so you can choose whatever name you want. The important thing in this step is the DB path, because you need a path that you can use in every platform, especially in iOS, as I mentioned before. And with the SQLite async connection object, you can make the interactions with the database, all the CRUD stuff like create, read, update, and delete data. It's through these objects. And to create a table in SQLite, tables are created from C# classes that represent our data models. For example, we have this user class. We have some attributes like a primary key that auto-increments this int, the ID property. And if you want to store more information about the users, you can use some properties like a name or an age, and you can have this information in a table when you have the final DB file for the SQLite database. To create the table, after you define this model, you use the createTable async method in the SQLite async connection. We create this DB object using the SQLite async connection, and it have the method createTable async. And of course, you need to set the model that you want to use for the table. Finally, after we create our table, we can insert data, read, update, and delete using SQLite and LinkU. With SQLite Net PCL, I think the main advantage is that we can use some LinkU queries, and it's a kind of transparent for C# developers. So for create the creation or inserts, we can use insert async and the objects. To read data, we can read all the table and then convert it to a collection, a C# collection. To update data, we have update async methods and the delete async for delete information. There are some other options to make bulk inserts or bulk updates. And you can see it in the documentations, but it's almost the same like this, the insert async and the async, but instead of use only a simple object, you use a collection. Is the main difference between using only insert or the bulk options. It's important to know that there are bulk options, because if you insert several data using only the insert async, like in a for cycle or for each loop, it will be very, very slow. So it's better to use the other options that are optimized to insert a lot of data. The second topic for this session is preferences, and it's very simple. Preferences are useful for storing configuration information, user settings, or other data that don't require a full-blown database like SQLite. Unlike SQLite, preferences are not ideal for store large amounts of data or perform complex queries. Sometimes people want to save a lot of data using preferences, and they use workarounds like a JSON file or an XML file. It works, but you have to serialize and deserialize, and you add a lot of complex in your applications. So it's better to choose the best option for the kind of data you want to store in your application. And you can combine SQLite, preferences, files, and the secure storage, and have a better approach for every scenario that you want to cover. To use preferences, user preferences is easier than SQLite. We need to define a key. In this case, it's a string key. The name of the key is app has language selection. And to access the values or to save the values, you can use the Microsoft MAUI storage API. The name of the API is preferences. If you are using NET MAUI with .NET 6 or .NET 7, the namespace is defined as part of implicit using, so you don't have to import the Microsoft MAUI storage namespace, and you can access the preferences class directly. And it has two methods, the get method to read the data and the set method to save the data. Also, you need the key. And for the get methods, you can define a default value. If the key doesn't have any information stored in the preferences, you can get this default value. And for the set method, you only need the key and the value that you want to store. The next topic is also a simple topic like preferences. The use case for files of file handle is useful for working with different types of content like images, documents, audio files, or store data in custom formats. If the images are small, you can use SQLite. There are some studies and some blog posts about the performance of store images in SQLite and in files, about the speed, the performance of the applications. But normally, I think it's better to use files to store all the images, and you don't have to compare about the performance for a small image, big image, medium image, and you know there are a lot of information in custom format, not only in images, that are better to manage in the file system using paths like in the old fashion. To use the file API is like .NET. You can access specific folder paths in NET MAUI using file system. We saw this file system class during the SQLite DB path definition. You can use it for file handling. This class is from Microsoft MAUI storage, like the preferences. Some common folders we might access include the user documents, the apps folders, the cache folders, the app data directory is one of the most common during the NET MAUI development. And here are some examples about how to read data and how to write data in files. So we can define the file path, like in the SQLite sample, and we can use the system AO file class to write data in text, in bytes, or using only a collection of lines, string lines, like in the old .NET framework. And for read information, we can use the read all text in the file class. And you have to use the same file path that you use for the file creation. Okay, and in NET MAUI, we have an additional API to handle larger files, big files that you need to use in an stream, data stream, or binary files. You can use for that the file system class. It is also in the MAUI storage namespace, and it has a method open app package file async. And of course, you need the path of the file. So with this method, we can have an string, a memory string, and for some scenarios, it's easier than the system IO file class methods. Also, you have some additional methods to get information about the files in an directory, to create more complex paths, to review all the information that we are storing in the file system, not only in the mobile application, also in desktop application. And because most of this is the same in .NET Framework, .NET Standard, .NET Core, and .NET MAUI, that is part of .NET, you can create some custom libraries that you can use across all of these technologies. So sometimes it's good to choose APIs that cover several technologies in the .NET ecosystem. And finally, a special mention about secure storage. The use case for secure storage is to save sensitive information like password, authentication tokens, other kind of IDs that you have to keep secret. And it's like preferences API. It's a key value store. It's important to know that this secure storage relies on the underlying platform, like the keychain in iOS or the key store on Android. And it's important because you have to check the latest documentation for this API. In iOS, you need some extra configurations in places like the entitlements file, or in Android, the manifest, the Android manifest. So it's not as simple as the preferences because you need some extra configuration. The code is simple, but other configurations are more complex. For example, in iOS, you need the Apple developer account to make use of these permissions for store secret information in the iOS keychain. Here is an example of how to use the secure storage. We need also a key for the dictionary, the internal dictionary. The main difference between secure storage and the preference API is that the methods in secure storage are async, so we need to use await secure storage, set async, the key that we want to use to store information, and the information. To get the information, we use secure storage, get async method, and the key of the information. In this case, we don't have any default value like in the preferences API. And to remove some information, we can use the remove method. Also, we have a method to check if the key that we want to use are created in the internal dictionary, in the internal API. So we can use the contains key and the key that we want to check. And that's all about the local storage options. There are a lot of other NuGet packages that cover other scenarios like cache data, real-time synchronization, LaRealm, the Realm NuGet package. But I think these options are the most common in Mac experience. And now we are going to share a sample application that are making use of almost these APIs. So let me share the app running. I need to close the presentation. And I have my Android emulator, and I am going to run the sample application. I create this application for a training that I gave the last year, but it's really the same implementations that I am using in some production applications with some of my clients. So I take the most important part of the implementations, the part that are not confidential, and I can share how I am managing the storage option. First, I am starting in the menu page because I made the login before the session. So I am storing the authentication token in the preferences API. I can share the code. I have the preferences implementation, and I have the user token key, and of course a property that I am used to set the information and get the token. So if I have a token, I can skip the splash screen and the login page. So that's why I am in the main menu page. Then if I choose to create a new report, you can see that I have a photo. I can take more photos using the NET MAUI APIs for this objective. And every time I am taking photos, I am saving it in the file storage. So that's why I have some information that is loading during the initialization of every page. For example, I have some information about this report. I am saving all of this information using a local file, using file.write all text or read all text methods. And I am not using SQLite because this is temp data. If the application crash and the user close the application because an error and other things that happen in real world, I can recover that information that it's incomplete, that is not validated. So I don't need all the complexity of SQLite application. because I only need the file to recover the user data inputs. But after I finish the report, I can see a preview, and the next step is to send that information to the Azure API. And before I send the information to Azure API, I will save all of this information in SQLite because it's data that is validated, is complete, and I need that information in a local storage with more resources like SQLite because it's something filed during the transmission of data between the mobile application and the API. I can try to resend the information later when I have internet connection or during a better time in the day. It depends of the problem that we are going to solve with the application. So as you can see here, I am using the methods that I shared before during the presentation, the save value async method, relies of SQLite async connection. I have two tables, pending transactions and completed transaction. Pending transaction are information or records that are saved during or before the transmission of the data to the API, and complete transactions are the transactions that get the OK status from the API. So depending of the API results, I will change the transaction from pending to complete, or I can keep the information in the pending transaction table. So this is the implementation of SQLite in this application. So I think this is a good example of the use of the local storage option because I am using preferences, I am using the file system and SQLite. I don't use the secure storage for this sample because it was created for a training and not all of the students have access to the Apple developer account, and it's challenging to make that implementations during a training. But I think for the authentication token, the better place to store it is the secure storage. It's the only change that I will make to this sample. About the preferences, I have the same application in iOS. Actually, it's the same code, the same code, the same project. I made the installation before the session. And if I start this for the first time, I won't see the menu page. I am going to ask the user to choose a language, then accept the terms and conditions. I am using a local file to show the terms and conditions. Actually, it's a HTML file. And when the user agree the terms and conditions and choose a language, I can have all of this information in the preference storage. So the next time the user start the application, they won't ask again about this information. They will be redirected to the login page or the menu page, depends of the login status. And I think that is all for this session about local storage. I can share the screen to Luis for the practical sample. Not Luis?
Yes, that's right. So thank you very much, Humberto. I think it was a complete, let's say, showcase of the different options. So before we, let's say, implement it on our own with the part 4 tutorial, there are two questions or some questions from the audience. So Bruno, if you can help us with
yes. The first one, I know that you already answered this one, but I think it will be nice to have it also here. It's around when you show the class with the attributes and the fields, if the attributes are similar to Entity Framework?
No, I don't think so. SQLite Net PCL is simpler than Entity Framework, so it doesn't have all the power of Entity Framework Fluent API.
Yes, maybe some of them are shared, but as you said, yeah, Entity Framework Core is more powerful. On the other hand, I have seen some, let's say, blog posts, especially when it was with Xamarin, that EF Core was a bit slower than SQLite. Not sure if you know a bit about this or if you have tested it, but I remember that I read about it for Xamarin, let's say.
Also, SQLite, it's a complex solution. You can do a lot of stuff using queries, but SQLite Net PCL is only a layer to simplify the implementation for .NET developers. So you don't have all of the access to SQLite power using SQLite Net PCL. You can use some queries to create foreign keys, to implement some special attributes or options for your tables, but you need to learn about how to use directly the SQLite APIs and don't use all of the features of SQLite Net PCL. So for complex scenarios, you can use Entity Framework or directly the SQLite API.
Yes, that is important because when you, let's say, use SQL Net PCL NuGet package, one of the common questions is, okay, how can I enable foreign key support? Is there any attribute? And as you said, the SQL Net PCL is, let's say, some partial implementation of the whole SQL capabilities. So that one is not supported, let's say, with an attribute. However, you can definitely write a query against your tables, and you can, let's say, handle it with the queries. Even I remember that I wrote a post about it. I will share it in a second. In Xamarin, there was a NuGet package, SQL Net PCL extensions, if I remember, that's the name. But that one is not, let's say, available for .NET MAUI developers. Then again, you can write queries. But yeah, this is one important thing to mention about the PCL. I will share the link about how to, let's say, implement foreign keys with SQL, let's say, Net PCL, but writing the queries. Okay,
yes,
thank you.
I think the best feature of SQLite Net PCL is the use of LinkQ for Net developers.
Okay, thank you. And there was another question.
I know that you answer. I know that you answered the other one from Jose, that basically, which software do you recommend to see tables graphically in a SQL little database? And you mentioned one, but if you want to make it public, let's go fast here, because I know that you later need to do the demo.
Yes, there is the DB browser for SQLite, and also you can use Azure Data Studio. There should be either an extension or directly implemented. Maybe also our good friend Jesus Hill can tell us. So greetings to our friend.
Yes, greetings to Jesus. And yes, during one session last year, Jesus taught us about how to use SQL Management Studio and Data Studio to manage SQLite files.
Okay, perfect.
And it's good to know about that options, SQLite DB Browser or Azure Data Studio and SQLite Management Studio, because in some scenarios, I am the necessity to export the information, the DB files, because it's easier to manage information in a desktop application or a graphic environment like DB Browser. solve some problems. So it's good to share that information.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, so well, now we can proceed with our tutorial. So for this, let's say part number 4, we implement the local data persistence, let's say in 2 scenarios. One of them is the SQLite NuGet package, and the second one is the user preferences that Humberto mentioned. So the first part is to include the 2 NuGet packages that Humberto mentioned. One of them is the SQL.NET PCL. So we just need to be careful because there are a lot of implementations. So let's say make sure that we are selecting the one authored by SQLNet PCL. And the second NuGet package is it is known as the batteries. This one is SQL PCL raw bundle green. I can, let's say, also share some experience that sometimes, maybe depending on the operating system version of the device or emulator, you might need to add other NuGet packages. For example, when I was testing or building, writing this tutorial, I had to incorporate this dynamic CDECL NuGet package. So yeah, I also will add it. And maybe depending on also on the version, you might need SQLite 3 or even Core. It also depends if you are working on iOS or Android. I think right now that in iOS, you don't need to do anything else but adding the first 2 NuGet packages, maybe this one as well. But let's say a couple of years ago, you even had to write some code in the app delegate class. Okay, so let's do that. I have the application here. By the way, there is a contribution by Brian Roxon. Thank you very much. So I will, when I run the application, I will show the, let's say, improved UI that he implemented after we finished part 3. So thank you very much also for that, friend. So I have the 3 NuGet packages that I mentioned. So let's do SQLNet PCL. We will just accept the terms, additional packages. That's it. This is the first one. Second one, it was the bundle green. And then the CDA, the provider CDECL. Okay, here. Yes. We accept, and I just make sure that they have been added. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Okay. So they are. Yeah, they are there. Good. And now we can add, let's say, another thing that Humberto mentioned, which was the file name of the recipe and also the location. In this case, the app data directory. For that, I'm going to add a new class in the helpers folder. So let's bring constants. And yeah, we will include these 2. Oops, I think it wasn't added correctly. Okay, second, yes, here it is. Database file name and also the database path. Well, I will just make some minor change to ensure that I have a new, let's say, version. Sometimes you, let's say, modify the structure of your tables. Maybe you are working, you added a new table, but later you need to modify the table structure, add new table properties, and so. And maybe there is a conflict with the current database version because you added some rule or you change the type. Maybe one field was integer, but now it is a string, but there was already data in your database. So there is, as I said, some issue, some problem. One solution for that is just to change the name of your file, and it means there will be a new database file. The table will be, or the database structure will be recreated. Of course, there will be no data, but yeah, it's fine, because in the end you are working with or you are like testing. If somehow, let's say, you need actually to let's say you have one version of your application already published, already in production, then you implement a new version, but you are adding new tables, or you are incorporating new fields. You might need to, you can't like wipe out, of course, the previous version, so you might need to add code for a migration of your database. So it is recommended to, let's say, follow, let's say, this approach, like adding version or versioning your database. I do it as simple as the file name, but you can follow other approaches. Okay. Then we are creating a table class. In this case, I am adding, first of all, a class. I'm calling it a basic table. Maybe I will increase the size here. Sorry for that. Yeah, in this case, my tables, let's say, will have this base class, and all the classes will inherit from it. As you can observe, we are adding the attribute that Humberto mentioned to create an or simulate like an identity field. In this case, it's a primary key. It also auto increment. And then my recipe class will inherit from this basic table. So it will already contain a primary key. Also, I am adding the table attribute. It is not required, but in case that you need to write some queries, you can specify the table name. So it is like optional, but recommended, especially if you are writing, let's say, queries. Okay, so first things first, in the models folder, we add basic table. There is also another advantage of adding this new table. Since all my, let's say, models will inherit from basic table, and I want, let's say, the models to be treated as classes, or maybe some of them, I can also write generic code. You will see later when we build a services layer, even also Humberto show it. You don't need to write specific methods. Okay, add recipe, add employee, add user. Instead, you can write generic methods, and that will simplify things, of course. In my case, I will also add some restrictions for that. So only the models who inherit, let's say, from basic table, you can, let's say, write or use the methods add data, get data, because of course they are meant to be tables. You will see in a second. Okay, so regarding the recipe, as I said, I am inheriting from basic table. We are also adding the table attribute, which is, let's say, recipes. And I think that's it. Okay, but I don't want it from here. I want it from using, oh, sorry. Using SQLite, yes. And optionally, there are other attributes, like, for example, the max length, if you want to do it for some fields such as the, let's say, string ones, like, okay, only this is the maximum number of characters. And now we are building a database access service, similar to what we did with the internet service, where we obtained the list of recipes. We are also defining an interface for dependency injection. In this case, as you can observe, we are creating this interface which contains 3 methods. Get items, all the information from the table, count items, how many elements are in a specific table, and also add items, which essentially is the bulk insert that Humberto mentioned. Of course, you know that we have, like, I think 5 recipes from an internet service. What we are going to do is that we are going to retrieve that data from internet, and we are going to create or mirror that information into a local database. As Humberto mentioned, rather than adding one by one, we will add all of them at once. There are several advantages. First of all, performance, because it means the file will not like do one read operation, one insert operation per, let's say, for each loop, let's say, iteration. Instead, it is just one access to the database, insert all of them, and then retrieve the information. This is also effectively or efficient when you are doing a remote insert, rather than if you need to insert a lot of data, you are not, let's say, sending one by one. You send all the data and it performs everything at once. Yes, so it is about performance. Okay, so in our services layer, let's add this interface. The name is iLocalDB service, and we are adding the code. Yes, and as you can see, it's generic. I also need the namespace, right? So only classes who inherit from basic table and have a default constructor can be used. And then the implementation, right? And here in the implementation, besides the 3 methods that we define in the interface, we are also specifying an init method, which guarantees that there is a connection to the file. When it is null, of course, we use the SQLite async connection class that Humberto mentioned. And we also add, let's say, some debugging support capabilities. And we also create the tables. In this case, we only have one, which is a recipe. Besides that, there is the implementation of each of the method: get items, just connection table, convert it to a list, count items, count async method, and also add items. There is insert all async, which accepts a list of elements. And that's it. Okay, so I will just copy all the content, and we create our class. Local DB service. Oops, there it is. And here we have. Okay. The next part is to register this interface and also the implementation. So we can simply proceed, go to the MAUI program, C#, and we register here. So now it can be injected, right? Okay, so the next part is to integrate this capability into the recipe collection view model. Let's say that now we want to display the information from this local database, but first we are going to also add it. So first of all, we are adding a field, private field, in our recipe collection view model, which is this one, iLocalDB service. Then we are injecting it into the constructor, and we are getting the reference. So here it is. And this, yes, that's it. And the next part is to, in the get recipes async method, instead of obtaining the data from internet, we are obtaining it from the local service. And here we have, right? You can see we are invoking the get items method from local DB service, and we are specifying the type, in this case, the generic recipe. Okay, that's it. So no big change, but we are also adding another command. We are implementing a new button to add the local recipes. As you can observe, first of all, we obtain the recipes from internet, because we are not adding, let's say, manually. We are not implementing a new form or page for that. Instead, to simplify this, we get the data from internet, and we pass this list of recipes to the local service, and then we add it. To avoid the user adding this each time, we just count how many data we have. If we have 0, then we add it. Otherwise, we just send a message, there is already data, so we are not duplicating it. So for this, we simply add a new command in this recipe, a collection view model. And now we add, let's say, this into the interface. So in the recipe collection view model, we are adding, let's say, a new row. Okay, I can add it, that's very simple. And we are adding a new button. So let's do it. In the view, we add a new row. And we add a new button. Here it is, with the add local recipes command. And finally, the activity indicator, we grab, let's say, the 3 grids, 3 rows, and that's it. Okay, so let's test our application. And very quickly, while the application is building, I'm going to ask Humberto one of the most common questions that we see in the community. What happens, or how can I do if I need to connect to an SQL server database from my mobile application? Can I do it? Should I do it? Should I not do it? What do you think about it?
Luis has a good post in his blog about SQL Server connection with NET APIs. Normally, it's not recommended to make the connection between the mobile application and the SQL Server
directly.
First, because the security, you need the connection string in your application, and you can solve that problem if you have a good DBA, but it's easier to create an API that only exposes the information that you need. It's more restrictive, or you only have one method that return information, and you don't need to take care about all of the permissions. Other important situation about the connections, directly between the mobile application and the database, is the connection itself, because if you have an API, you only have one connection between the database and the API. In the mobile application, you have one connection per user, and the users normally don't have patience, and they play with the Wi-Fi, the mobile connection in their mobile phone. So you will have a chaos in your connection pool between the applications and the SQL database. And other good reason to avoid the connection is the stability of the connectors. Normally, in an API, you need to update the NuGet packages, or either if you use Entity Framework or ADO connections. There are more stable connectors than the mobiles one. Actually, some of the mobile NuGet packages are from the community, and the Microsoft ones are kind of deprecated, because if you use the new NuGet packages, you will get a not supported platform exception. You have to use an old NuGet package if you want to connect that directly NET MAUI to the SQL Server.
Okay.
And hey, I also just share a link. If you want to expose your database as an API, we have this data API builder, which is SDK/tool/whatever that basically allows you to do this. So yes, it's a cool question. And we have another set of questions, but we can go with later. I see the app is up and running, as Eric says, just in time. So yes, let's go for it.
Okay, so if I click on Get Recipes, now no data will be displayed, because right now our database is empty. If you remember previously, we commented the line where we obtain the data from internet, but now we are getting the data from local device. So first, I will click on the second button, add local recipes, and it, okay, in this case, we get this result. The local database now contains new information, meaning that if I click on the first button, you will see that now the data, local data is displayed. And you can also observe that the UI is improved thanks to Brian, let's say, code or contribution. So thank you very much for that, friend. Okay, so this is like half of the tutorial. Maybe like your homework will be to complete it with the implementation of user preferences. In this case, a new page where the user sets like online mode or offline mode is implemented, and meaning that the data can be retrieved from internet or from a local database. So yeah, you can complete it with that. So, well, I think we are also on time, but before we say goodbye, in September, there will be like a follow-up session. One of the previous questions or during previous stream was about handlers, how to customize, control, or even create a new ones. So there will be a session about that. So stay tuned on with the Microsoft Reactor series and also social media, because yeah, we will be here again to talk about that, let's say, intermediate topic. So we are like increasing the level. So, okay, any final comments, friends?
No, there are a couple of questions here that basically are solved and answering them in the chat. So yes, we have a new session. We are going to take a couple of weeks of vacation. Now it's time to relax, and then back in September to talk about handlers. And as usual, we share the links of our survey. Please let us know what you like, what you didn't like, what we can do better, what other topics that, there it is. Thanks, Alexia. What other topics you want to see here. And hey, see you next one. Thanks a lot, Luis. Thanks a lot, Humberto. It's a pleasure. And I'm looking forward for the next one that people are asking, and we are adding sessions. So this is super cool. Thanks. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.